Hello and welcome to the review of the first episode of Netflix Sandman. Before we begin, let us first get some things in order. I am a bit surprised there was no critical review done for this show here on YouTube. Neil Gaiman's Sandman was a very popular and successful comic during its run, and spawned many other titles related to the world in order to capitalize on said popularity. I myself am a Neil Gaiman fan. I've read the series including many other books and comics written by Neil. I own a signed copy of Sandman #1. Not purchased signed, but got signed. At cons, Neil has always gathered long lines for his appearances. In regards to my short, but personal interactions with Neil as a fan, he was, and I would assume still, is extremely gracious and considerate with his limited time. Finally, but probably most important, given the pronouns listed in the promo material, I know this show is woke, and because of the promo material, I believe the showrunners are making that statement overtly before a single second was aired. Now it was said somewhere that the Sandman was woke before woke was a thing. If that's true, then the show should be 100% accurate while still satisfying the showrunners. Now with all of that out of the way, let's begin. Chapter 1, Sleep of the Just. This begins the story arc Preludes and Nocturnes, which is covered in the first 8 issues of the comic. As the first episode begins, we get a flyby of the current time which transitions into the realm of the dreaming, via Jessame the Raven, narrated by Morpheus. We get a glimpse of Morpheus in his throne room with a stained glass window changing into the image of the Corinthian. His pouch, ruby and helm are all shown and he's about to leave the dreaming. Lucian steps forwards, and we get our first race/gender swapped character, and she asks him if he's coming back. An interesting question. When a flatmate or spouse leaves their home, one does not normally ask if they are coming back, but when. Being that Morpheus is immortal, and has left his realm countless times, did Lucian ask this question every time? Or rather, is it this one time she has these prescient thoughts? As I stated in the opening, this is a woke show, and Lucian is now a female person of color. What do you think are the chances she's right? 10%? 50%? Maybe even 80%? Stay tuned. Now we're in Wych Cross, England. 1916. Professor Hathaway of the Royal Museum comes to pay a visit to Roderick Burgess's abode. He is greeted by a young Alex Burgess and informs the professor his father prefers to be addressed as Magus. We briefly meet Mr. Hyde. A little more about him later. We find out that Roderick Burgess and the professor met at an earlier time, discussing what Burgess was trying to do, and he asks the professor if he's come to reconsider. We learn that the professor's son has just recently died in the Battle of Jutland, and Burgess tells him that his son Randall died in the Gallipoli campaign. Burgess then asks if he has the grimoire. The professor inquires if he gives him the book, if Burgess can capture death, with the hope to plead to give them back their lost sons. That is the motive. With the book, they begin the incantation ritual to summon death. The scene changes to New Orleans where we see the Corinthian, just after murdering a person when Morpheus appears behind him. He states that nightmares do not belong outside the realm of dreams. The Corinthian questions Morpheus, for wasn't this the reason he was created? And in the waking world they can do whatever they want, and this where they should be. Saying nothing, Morpheus uses his ruby to banish the Corinthian. But upon performing the act, Morpheus disintegrates. Roderick Burgess continues his incantation and with a fluttering of mystic energy and loud noises, Morpheus falls into the circle of protection. Amazed and cautious, Burgess approaches closer making sure the seal isn't broken. He instructs Alex to take his pouch and ruby until Burgess removes Morpheus's cloak to reveal a skinny naked man underneath. He carefully removes his helm and lets him rest before citing his demands. Morpheus narrates the damage that has been done for being imprisoned. For not only will it affect his realm, but the waking world as well. We meet race-swapped character number 2, Unity Kincaid, for the first time affected by the sleeping sickness, as well as many others as the camera pans out. Let us pause for a moment. There is nothing wrong about race/gender swapping a character if it does not affect the story or representation in any way. However, if it does or alters the plausibility, then there is an issue. As we have already seen Lucian to be a race/gender swapped character, and a very minor character from the comic, it should not be an issue, yes. For example, Denis Villeneuve's Dune, Dr. Kynes was a race/gender swapped character. Although relevant to the story, Dr. Kynes is still a minor character, and her being female and black is irrelevant in regard to being the planetologist. Another example is Morgan Freeman in Shawshank. He is a main character, and yet it does not affect the story or the plausibility in any way. However, casting a black man justly imprisoned for committing murder, I wonder if Morgan Freeman would have even been offered the role if wokeness was so prevalent back then. Now let's do the opposite. Did anyone believe that John Wayne was a good representation of Genghis Khan? Can you immerse yourself in the story when the casting constantly drags you out of the show's plausibility? Now ask yourself, does she look like a nuclear scientist? Am I saying a woman with a doctorate in nuclear science cannot be pretty, cannot be this young, cannot have a body that spends 30 hours a week in the gym and maintain a keto diet on a 16/8 fasting regimen? No. Of course it is possible. If you know one, please comment down below. If you ever saw a chupacabra, please list it below as well. I am curious to know which one is more rare. Okay, digression over. Let's continue. The next morning, Burgess is visited by the Corinthian. He tells Burgess that he knows he caught Morpheus and that he's here to help him. The Corinthian informs him that there is more than death to the endless, and he caught Dream, much to Burgess's disappointment. He lets him know Dream's trinkets can give him power, prolong his life, and gives him instructions on how to contain Morpheus. Burgess confronts Morpheus, informing him what he now knows. He asks if he has the power to grant him his dead son back. However, Burgess is doubtful and leaves. 10 years pass, and we see Burgess is popular and hosting lavish parties. His son Alex is now a young man. Alex is an insecure beta male. While he has to tell an excess of guests there is no more room to host them for the night. This upsets some guests, and threaten him until they are told that he is the son of the Magus by Ethel Cripps. Empowered at the notion, Alex orders the guests to leave, and Ethel is granted to see Roderick. The next morning, the night guard's shift is over, and nobody is available to watch Morpheus, so Alex volunteers. As he sees Morpheus in the glass cage, Alex apologizes to him and pleads he'll be released if he only grants his father what he wishes. As he speaks to Morpheus, Roderick interrupts his one-way conversation, and questions Alex what he was doing. Upstairs, Roderick scolds Alex out of ignorance and insecurity, and is about to beat him when he sees Jessame at the window. He grabs a rifle and loads it, and Alex comments it can't be the same bird. Roderick, angered at the statement, shoves the rifle into Alex's hands and tells him to prove his loyalty, and kill Jessame. We get a sequence with Jessame flying into the mansion undetected, taking a match, striking it against the wall in flight, and dropping it onto some paper to start a fire. The guards come out noticing the smoke and Jessame flies into the cellar, and begins pecking away at the glass dome. Bang! Jessame is killed by Alex, leaving a messy blood splat on the glass dome. Alex collects the dead bird, and Morpheus looks on broodingly sad. Fast forward to the near future, we find out that Ethel is pregnant, much to the dismay of Roderick. Alex sees Ethel crying as Roderick demanded for an abortion. We then learn that Ethel leaves, taking all of Morpheus's belongings as well as 200 grand in cash. Apparently, he never invested in a lockable safe, or he gave her the combination, which would beg the question. Why? Who knows? Let me stop it right here. This is a major deviation from the comic. Ethel is not pregnant, and do you remember this man from the beginning? This is Ruthven Sykes, the second in command of the Ancient Order of Mysteries. Well, he is the one that steals Morpheus's tools, the cash, and runs off with Ethel Cripps. His defection causes a schism of the Order, and creates the magical war between himself and Roderick Burgess. All of this is omitted, and in my opinion, in order to preserve a woke narrative. Yes, Ruthven Sykes is not a race-swapped character. He is black in the comics. Yes, they could have race-swapped him as a white man, but the entire magic war is still omitted in order to give Ethel Cripps a girl boss moment. She runs away independently using only her cunning and street smarts. Now, how she steals the tools and $200,000 in cash is a mystery. It is only common sense to believe that these valuable items, as well as a large sum of cash, would be kept someplace secure, like a locked safe. Why Roderick would give her access to it is beyond me. We are not shown she has access to these valuables, or even knows where or what they are. Also, if you find this weird-looking gas mask thing, are you going to burden your hasty escape without any knowledge of what its value is? On the other hand, Ruthven Sykes was there when Morpheus was captured, so he knows exactly what all those items are, and being second in command of the Order, it makes sense that he would know where they are being kept, and have access to them. Anyway, Roderick pleads with Morpheus once again, and if he'll grant his wishes he'll be released. It is during this time that Sykes trades the helm for the protection amulet, and when Ethel leaves Sykes, she takes everything with her including the amulet. With the amulet gone, Mr. Sykes dies. Back to the show, Alex tries to calm his father down, but they end up in a scuffle, and Roderick bangs his head against the glass dome and dies. Morpheus then rises to his feet, and reaches out to Alex. He reaches out as well, until he changes his mind and leaves to think. Race swap number 3, Paul the groundskeeper, offers his condolences to Alex as well as his affections. Now being lovers, Alex brings Paul to see Morpheus for himself. Alex then pleads to him that he will release him on the condition that he would not harm either of them. Morpheus says nothing, and Paul tells Alex to tell Morpheus that he means it. He reassures Morpheus he means it, but again, Morpheus says nothing. Morpheus contemplates if he should have taken him at his word, and perhaps he was speaking truthfully, but his anger still outweighs his mercy, and cannot forgive him. Alex is now an old man. He still pleads just to be left alone. He says he won't be coming down anymore, and Paul wheels him away. As the wheelchair crosses over the seal, it mars the seal, breaking it. Paul looks down and notices it, then looks at Morpheus with a slight nod and then leaves. The guards watching Morpheus gossip, until one falls asleep dreaming of a beach. Morpheus approaches him in his dream, and picks up a handful of sand. The guard fires at him in his dream, when in reality he is shooting at the glass dome. The shots hit the dome, cracking it, and Morpheus emerges and blows sand into their faces. Alex awakens looking for Paul, and climbs a spiral staircase, and sees Morpheus sitting in a chair ominously waiting for him. Alex realizes Morpheus is free and pleads to him that he is sorry, but Morpheus has no remorse. Morpheus blows sand into his face and grants him eternal sleep of continuous nightmares. Let's stop here, as this is another deviation. Yes, a seal gets broken from the wheelchair, but Paul does not notice, thus does not acknowledge Morpheus what was done. Nothing is said, but the way I take it, is Paul did this intentionally, or at the very least, decides not to repair the seal, thus it is by his intentional actions that allows Morpheus to be free. In the comic, Morpheus notices the seal is broken, and choosing the right time, he cunningly fakes his death or illness, in order to get the guards to open the cage. The difference of the show is Morpheus is freed not by his own actions, but by the actions of the pure-hearted black bloke. That is another change of the source material solely to promote a woke narrative. In my opinion, this is unacceptable. Now let's continue with what Paul did. Morpheus exacts his punishment on Alex, basically making him suffer for the rest of his mortal life. And whose fault is that? Paul's fault. The person that is in love with Alex. I am not saying that the punishment isn't just, but that is a betrayal of trust to a person he is supposedly in love with. He backstabbed his lover that provided everything to him, and even if you want to argue that he did what was morally right, Paul still waited decades. Decades. Until he did something about it. He still aided and abetted in the crime, and did nothing year after year, so Paul is just as guilty as Alex. Finally, we see Morpheus lying on the ground on the outskirts of the dreaming when Lucian approaches, and rejoices to tell Morpheus that he is home. Stop again. In the beginning, we saw the flyby of the dreaming. It's pretty big, right? The castle itself is big, right? And of all the days from all the years of all minutes and all the seconds that passed during Morpheus's 100 years of captivity, Lucian just happened to be taking a walk in the exact very spot that Morpheus reappears in the dreaming. What are the chances? She should go to Monte Carlo and bet it all on black. Yes, Lucian tells him that the realm isn't as he left it. When Morpheus opens the gate, he sees the palace is in ruins, and everything is in disarray. He asks what happened, and Lucian tells him that he is the dreaming, and when he left, the realm began to deteriorate. Morpheus asks what about all of the inhabitants. Lucian tells him most have gone, with some in search for him. Annoyed, Morpheus asks if his citizens had so little faith in him. And with determination, he says he will bring everybody back as nightmares and dreams have no place in the waking world. He states he built this world and he will build it again. This concludes episode 1. Review time. On the surface, the episode appears accurate story-wise. Yes, there are changes due to copyright issues and pacing, which is completely understandable. However, there are little changes here and there, and throughout the entire series it translates to death by a million paper cuts. We'll go through them as they arise. In this episode, the Corinthian is introduced already, and he acts as the main antagonist throughout the series. In the comic, he is not involved in this story arc at all. This is not a deal breaker, but it does diminish Roderick Burgess as a character. Instead of finding out who Morpheus is on his own, he is simply told by the Corinthian who Morpheus is. Writers are supposed to show, not tell, but this is just straight out telling. That's weak writing, and with that said, they have the talents of Charles Dance at their disposal, and he is just wasted, so let me continue. Do you remember this bloke? Mr. Ruthven Sykes, second in command in the Order. He causes a schism in the Order by branching off on his own. Roderick Burgess's attempts at retribution are all lost, wasting moments that they could have utilized the talents of Charles Dance. This plot point is 100% plausible, while Ethel in the show, stealing the items is not. Yet the showrunners chose the latter, thus giving Ethel the ability to show and activate girl boss mode, and not show the black person as being a conniving, disloyal, power-seeking thief. This change of the source material enables the show to keep its woke narrative intact. At this moment, ask yourself what is more important: following the source material faithfully, or changing it to promote a narrative you believe in. This is the fork in the road the showrunners arrived upon halfway of the very first episode, and this is the choice they took. True, the road they took has many other forks that could lead them back to the source material road, or at the very least, closer to that road's final destination. We will see how close they get as the show continues. Now that I've mentioned two major story deviations from the comic, let me tell you what I think is the biggest issue with the episode. It is small. Very small and almost unnoticeable, but like an untreated wound, it will fester and grow, eventually consuming its host and killing it. That wound is Lucien. Now, let me stress that in the comics, Lucien is not just a minor character, but an extremely minor character. Death, desire, destiny. They too are minor characters, but important characters to the overall story. Lucien is neither. Lucien is as important to the story as Merv Pumpkinhead. If either were omitted from the comic, it would not change the story in any way. In the comic, Lucien is a white male and serves a function in the Dreaming as librarian. He has a job function to do and Morpheus calls on him whenever he is needed. That is all. Yet, Netflix Sandman decided to expand on the character. In order to follow the tenets of woke storytelling, if one is female or a person of color, one can most likely do no wrong. Being that she is both, she definitely can do no wrong, especially when she is talking to her white male boss. By doing this, it props up Lucien and diminishes Morpheus as a character to the level of angsty teenager. This is a character assassination of Morpheus in the very first episode, which is totally unacceptable. Lucien does not counsel Morpheus in the comic. He is a loyal subject, and performs the duties that are asked upon him. That's it. The show's Lucien is Morpheus's angel on his shoulder, his rational thought, his wisdom, and his caretaker, which he is absolutely oblivious to all of these. All the decisions that Morpheus makes are made solely by him. The decisions are his, and his alone, whether they are correct or not. He is decisive and direct, rather than passive and unsure. By creating this version of Lucien, they take away all of the alpha male characteristics of Morpheus, and bestow them onto Lucien. Why? Yet, we know the reason before watching a single second of the show. It is why Lucien was not only race-swapped, but gender-swapped. Turning Morpheus into a white beta male and giving his alpha qualities to a black woman so she can activate girl boss mode on her white male lord and creator, fits the woke narrative the showrunners are propagating. As a fan of the Sandman, this aspect of the show pisses me off to no end. It is an absolute deal-breaker. Yes, this is only the first episode, and yes, Lucien is hardly in it, and yet, the things she does and says is only a glimmer of what's to come, and yet, this glimmer, this tiny little spark, is still enough to fuck up and spoil the entire episode. As we know, Game of Thrones was a good show until they ran out of source material. Everything about Dawn was rubbish too, but I digress. In this case, the showrunners have source material for every single episode they make, and the story deviations made are not due to budget or location restraints, but solely due to creative choices made in order to preserve and continue the woke narrative. For the people that have not read The Sandman, I offer this analogy of what is being done. The Godfather. I'm sure you've seen it, if not spoilers. Really fast, Don Vito gets incapacitated and son Sonny becomes Don, then gets whacked, then little brother Michael becomes Don. You know the rest. If the Sandman showrunners remade The Godfather, after Sonny gets whacked, Michael would not become Don of the family, but rather, Sister Connie would. Michael and Connie's roles from the movie would be reversed. She would become Donna of the family, and the bad guys would all get whacked, while she is being made godmother, and closes the door on her beta male husband. The story would be the same. All of the beats would be touched upon, but they would change the characters, and their roles in the story, in order to propagate a woke narrative. That is what is happening to this show in a nutshell. Finally, let me give the episode a grade. If I graded the episode, assuming I never read any of the source material, I would give it a 6. I would not know of any race/gender swapped characters. I would not care about Unity Kincaid at all. I would not know about Ruthven Sykes being omitted, and I would not know that Lucien was a character stealing Marquisha Sue. Overall, that is pretty good if one did not know anything about the comic, and I'm sure there were a lot of viewers that didn't. Having read the comic, I would give it a 3. Charles Dance is the highlight among lowlights. It's nice to see a visual of the dreaming, and the helm is a really nice prop. Other than that, everything looks too clean. There is no grit. Nothing looks lived in. It just looks like actors walking around sets and green screens. There is no realism to the world. Also, as the promo of the show was overtly woke, it is now 100% confirmed from this episode, the show is woke. I make that statement as neither good nor bad, but only as a factual observation. As we saw, this first episode had a bit of a turbulent start. However, the show is now up and running and it is possible it can catch the breeze and sail into a sunny horizon. Or perhaps the weather turns dark and gloomy, and there will be rough seas ahead. You'll find out in the next installment review. Until then, many thanks for watching, and I do hope to see you in the next video.